All right, thank you all for joining me again tonight. My name is Echo. This is the Free Your Mind podcast. We're here in the Enlightened Studios. And tonight we're talking with Roscoe Wallace, who's a restorative justice facilitator. I met him a few months ago and loved the energy and the passion that he brings to everything that he shares in his knowledge and his connection to the people learning about restorative justice. He was formerly a justice-involved individual. He's had a lot of lived experience through his life and a traumatic background in his life as well. So tonight, welcome to Roscoe Wallace. Thank you for joining me, Roscoe. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. I'm glad we got a chance to put this together. And I guess if you'd like to share, the first question would be, when did you become interested and involved in restorative justice? And when did you first hear about it? How did that come into your life?
For me, the first time I heard about restorative justice was from Van Jones. He was in the Barack Obama administration. And I heard about it. It was doing victim offender mediations. And I think I seen one on YouTube or something like that where there was this kid that had murdered this lady's son. And she went to prison to actually meet him and to see if she could forgive him. And through that, some dialogue happened. She didn't meet the kid or the murderer that she thought she was going to meet. She met a young kid that, I spent almost 20 years of his life. He was different than what she expected him to be. And long story short, they had that mediation. That's a big piece of restorative justice. They were able to heal. He was accountable. And later on, they started going basically to the Supreme Court and advocating for other kids in those similar situations. So I had seen that stuck out because to me, it was like I wasn't nowhere ready. And I'll talk about the loss of my son a little bit later. But it brought that up for me, basically saying, wow, could that actually happen? A human exchange like
Wow.
that, right?
Right, yeah.
So that was, very profound for me in this word restorative justice. And later on, I started hearing in echo chambers of politics, people talking about, it's soft on crime and different things like that. So it was something that interested me and made me want to evaluate it a little bit more.
Wow. Okay. Excellent. So, I mean, it's really more about relationships, and as they say, it's not a crime against the state, but against the human relationships. How would you define the restorative justice philosophy in your own words and what you've come to know about it?
The simplicity of it. Once you learn the foundation, which is three stakeholders, that's the victim, because restorative justice is victim-centered. It's not anything new. It's actually our indigenous brothers. This is kind of the way the tribes handle things. And, yes, and it is three stakeholders. You have the victim, you have the offender, and you have the community. And all three of those stakeholders' needs have to be met for it to be fully restorative. So we just can't meet the needs of one. Restorative justice say if you meet the needs of especially the top two, that's the victim and the offender, you will have safer communities. So what we have is a real big recidivism rate, and that comes from a system that we have now. Okay, you have restorative justice, but our current system is retributive. It's punishment based. Okay, we got DAs, prosecutors. They are liaisons. They the ones go out and actually supposed to be our mouthpiece and justice for us, right? But we know that's not to be true. And that is by the numbers. We have a national 98.5, sound like a radio station, plea bargain rate. Okay. And I'll talk about this a little bit later in my harms that I've committed. And I've committed violent crimes. Okay. And I've committed assaults, robberies. I wasn't in gangs, but I was affiliated through the drug era. So I've done a lot of that stuff. Started on this journey when I was 9 years old in juvenile facilities, homes, and all that stuff. And but I say all that to say that when I went in front of a DA or county attorney, when I went in front of him, the whole sole purpose of making that deal, that 98.5, was for me to get out as soon as possible. Nowhere in that equation did I think about the victim or who I harmed. All right, I'm being real. The county attorney, prosecutor, they come in with similar desires. They come in to get that conviction, to keep it moving, and maybe some aspirations later when they can look at how many convictions I've got. Anywhere in their equation or their calculation did the victim come into the room. See what I'm saying? So the victim voice is nowhere near being heard in our current system. Restorative justice in our current system, it's a two-part. It says two things: what crime you committed, because they're looking at it as a breach of law, what crime you committed, and how can we punish you, and how should we punish you. Restorative justice asks a two-part question, which is different. It asks what harm was done and what needs to be done to repair that harm. So it bases it on the relationship. Because when there's a face to what we call a breach of law. Those crimes, there's a relationship, there's a face, because not only is the person being victimized, but the community, that person's family, all that comes into that. And locking somebody up did not stop the perpetuation of that cycle. What stops that is the healing aspect. Sometimes victims just want to know what the hell, what did I do? What went wrong? And so there's those stakeholders again. Restorative justice is victim-centered. The victim should have the loudest voice in the room. They should determine if they want an apology or not. They should almost determine if there's time that they should also determine what type of accountability, right? And then we start having more of a just system and not just locking people up for mental health issues, addiction issues, because those issues there are a lot of times, issues that people are having within themselves. It's not even actually towards society. So restorative justice says we victim-centered, and then the offender, if we just simply, the accountability piece and getting them the accountability is asking him, why did he do it in the first place? And then the community has a responsibility after he's accountable to the victim and to himself and bettering himself, then we should receive him back into the community. And so that meets each need. The victim got their needs met, the offender got his needs met, and we have safer communities. Okay? So now in the indigenous society, how that worked, when tribes offended and harmed each other, all right, this kept them from going into any of this barbaric Bloods and Crip type stuff, right? Their elders would sit down, all right, and they rash it out. They said, okay, what harm was done? What can we do to repair it? And if there's a loss of life there, we can't bring it back. But we can try to make and repair it to its best potential. And that's what if we start looking at that in our communities, because right now all we got is the harm. We don't have no repair. And what happens there, bruh, is that people feel less valued.
Right. So it sounds like we definitely need a level of communication and relationship between the different parties, the harm, the victim, just like they had in the tribe system. where they're able to discuss what's happened, even if it's violent, and come to a conclusion and create some sort of rehabilitation, which is not the current system. So you're talking about the recidivism, the reoffending rate. And in the US, we're looking at something near 80%.
Absolutely.
And even currently, and I don't want to just throw out a whole lot of stats, I looked at it, some of the different ways to look at this issue of society, of our civilization, of how our country is right now. And there's a lot of statistics that are thrown around. But basically, one of the main ones that I've found is that the US has 5% of the global population. So in the entire world, US, 5% of all the people on the planet. But we've got 5 times that. We've got 25% of the prison population, which is over 2 million citizens, and roughly every night, close to 60,000 kids incarcerated in some way. So as an American, I mean, how do we look at this? How does this concern us individually and for our country? Like, how do we even make any sense of this moving forward as a country, as people who want to live in supposedly the best place in the world? How do we look at these numbers and, I guess, go forward with some sort of solutions?
Restorative justice is about basically basic humanity. It's premised on everybody has value. Everybody can be redeemed unless they can. And what that means is, I'm a spiritual person. I don't get into the religion. I'm spiritual, and in that realm, and that opens me up to a lot of other spiritual people that's connected. And for my, brothers that believe in the Bible, it's biblical. Just the nature of it is just believing that all of us has a purpose, man. All of us are valued, created in it. You know what I mean? And so we've lost a lot of empathy. We lost a lot of it because of the harms, the repetitive harms that we have committed on each other. I'll give you an example. For me, like I talked about, having an extensive career in the streets, lived experience, done a little bit of everything. And I say that without a lot of pride at all in that. A lot of people harm. But back to the repetitive harm. Me being a black man, like right now, a lot of my partnerships is with law enforcement, getting them engaged intentionally with the kids and different stuff. We talked about that. There was a time, man, that I hated those people guts. I mean,
Yeah.
But that was from a lot of the harm that I seen. So we start painting broad brushes. That's those guys, that's them,
Yeah.
And that's in a lot of our relationships. So we start saying, okay, how do we scrape that off, right? Okay. All right. One of the things is first we have to be accountable. And that's the toughest part. Because in those relationships, those events and things that we've done to each other come with emotions. And they're things that we don't like to feel. Shame, guilt, sadness, hurt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Fear. So when those topics comes up, we feel those connections. And the same way with everything else, it makes us want to shut it down, get angry. Well, hey, that wasn't me. And hey, I'm not that person, right? But once we get the communication going, okay? Because the understanding brings the empathy. See, empathy is a deeper level understanding.
Yeah.
It's more than, hey, I understand this. It's like, oh, I understand that. And wow, I understand that so much. And it's so similar to me that I empathize with you.
Right.
And that's a deeper level of a connection than just understanding. But we have to communicate to understand. If I sit down and tell you how I feel as a black man, and then you may say, dang, Roscoe, I never had those issues as a white man. Dang, brother, I empathize with you. And that is the human spirit. That is the blood that goes through our vein.
Yeah.
Common blood, same color.
Right.
I'm talking about what's on the inside, not on the outside.
Exactly.
So we still hurting all that. So we have to have the conversation and understand that our kids hurt. Same thing with the gun violence. Okay. It's one of those things where we're losing our humanity. Where is the empathy? And a lot of it is fear driven. Fear is really clouding decisions.
You're right.
Right? And so when rational people maybe sit down and say, hey, wait a minute, man. And kind of look at where we was maybe just the 80s, man. Come on, man. I mean, people was worried about a fight in the 80s. 90s, maybe somebody getting stabbed a little bit and then some drive-bys later on. But honestly, man, and that's driven because of fear, alienation, and it has nothing to do with the restorative spirit. We're not seeing value in each other. And so restorative justice is not a situational practice. Restorative justice is a way of life that we all should be living. One, in our communities and within our families. We got healing to do, brother. We spent a lifetime holding on to this stuff. That's the restorative spirit in a nutshell. It's not some program, this and that. They had it right. Our indigenous brothers had it right. They knew they could get tribal all day. You hit me out here, hit mine. We're gonna all grieve. Then where do it stop?
Right.
It's like the war in Ukraine. It's like all this stuff going on. This mass shooting, as they call it. You ask yourself, when do it stop? It stops when we start seeing the value. Right now, we're asking to see the value in our children. Can they just raise? So yes, that's the restorative spirit right there. And I think the biggest piece is starting to really gain traction. It used to just be a foreign, restorative justice. And then, like I said, it went through a period of when people heard about it, thought it was like some soft on crime and letting and they said, hug a thug. I heard that one too, hug a thug. That was the funny. So there's something geared in us to make us even think that way. That's a bad concept.
Right.
For me to give Echo a hug if he's hurting. So restorative justice also is about the facilitation and training is what I do in the probation, the prisons. But the bigger thing I would like to be more involved in is teaching those concepts of victim impact, emotional fluency before people get in handcuffs. Teaching them how to deal with situations and to value, their emotional well-being. Because that's where we're getting in trouble. We talked about that before, when we allow all that emotional baggage to build up, and it comes out and it's not too pretty.
Right.
So that's the biggest thing. And it's catching on. It's not looked at as a foreign concept, and it's not looked at something situational. I think back to the recidivism, our country is understanding that 5%, 25% locked up. And if we lock up more people, and we do, than any other country on the planet, unless Mars got some people up there we don't know about. All right. But right now, let's focus on the countries we do. We lock up more people than anybody on the planet, even China. And people with just tons of people, right? And some of these same places, I'm not going to get off subject, but some of these same places have safer gun and community cultures with more people than we do.
Right.
We talk mental health. But we lock up all these people, right? More than anybody else. So that means that If locking up people would make us safe, we would be the safest place on the planet, Echo. And me and you know, and our viewers know, we're not.
Right.
Okay. So that should tell us that the solely retributive approach, I believe in accountability. I also believe people need to be behind bars for a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
But the restorative approach, evaluate those situations accordingly. If somebody's repetitively offended and had opportunities, okay, but we're throwing away people and we're making their lives worse when they come back home. They're more bitter. Some of them say, man, all I had was a drug habit. Now I went to prison. I was raped. I was bullied. Money taken from me and my family. It's so much goes on in there. And so we have to evaluate that. Everybody don't deserve to be locked up. Then we have mental health people out here. Because if the viewers don't know, the biggest mental health facility, I'll ask you right now, where do you think the biggest mental health facility is?
I would imagine, I don't know, maybe it is the jail, the prison system.
It is. Absolutely. Because what happens is, brother, we drive around and see homeless people, and a lot of those people are suffering mentally. We see those people and we just keep driving. Law enforcement see them, they just keep driving, doing something a little weird over there, but they ain't. As soon as they touch something or somebody, then we lock them up. See, I've been in prison and I know what that pill line looked like too. It's a bunch of people in there suffering. So not only are we locking up people with addictions, but we're also locking up a bunch of people with mental health problems. We're locking up a bunch of people with almost misdemeanor offenses. We're destroying more lives with this current system than we're rehabilitating. And those words come up: corrections, rehabilitating. Those words should just fade. Because we got to ask ourselves, how much are we putting behind those words? How much do we believe in them? So restorative justice, once again, stands on the premise that, because you make a mistake, that don't make you trash.
Right.
Now, you keep going down that road and you're harming people in society, we're going to have to do something to you. And you may not, it may be harsh, but those are the things the victims in society, not people aspiring for higher positions in politics.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. There's so many.
That's a lot.
Well, there's just
a lot.
There's so many aspects to, whatever you call this issue, it's more than a situation. It's more than an issue, because as you're saying, even with the difference between someone who has caused the harm, someone who has a mental health issue, someone who has a substance abuse issue, it's fairly clear that those could be three different systems, not all funneled into the prison system alone, and different forms of rehabilitation for the different things that those people are going through, because they're not the same issue necessarily. One of the things that they mention in Norway, who's had a lot of success with this type of system, is that taking a person's liberty away from them is the main punishment. They're no longer at home with their family. They're no longer with their community. They're taking their freedom away, and that is the punishment. So what they're talking about is having a restorative system that is within the walls of the prison, as close, at a certain point, as close to outside the prison as possible, so they can re-enter the normal civilian life with some skills, and maybe without re-offending right away and getting sent right back in again. When was the first time that you heard about the success in Norway and what they were doing over there? And how do you feel like that helps us have a model for what we can put into place in the United States?
The first time I heard of Norway and their success was through the Community Justice Center, who I formerly worked for. I don't work with them guys now. Awesome organization. one of the things that they do a lot of work with guys in prison and a lot of guys on probation. I have an organization now, a LLC called ViableHealing. And so one of the things I want to do, I want to kind of capture the spirit of people before they have their worst moments with law enforcement and family and significant others. I want to create spaces, for people to heal. So anyway, but the Norway, just hearing about that, just was awesome. But I think the key word that you said was normal. And that's another piece of restorative justice, the normalization. Norway feels that the only thing you should lose is your liberty. So, okay, you're accountable there. But what they want to do is they want to prepare you to come back to be someone's good neighbor, not someone bitter,
Right.
not someone that the family still don't trust because we didn't have a lot of connections. I've been in prison, man, state and feds, juvenile, all that. It do not make you a better person. You have to make you a better person. I'm here to argue that it make more people worse. You have to fight hard because it's every man for every man, every woman for every woman. It's just a dark environment, and so it's almost like you're being punished twice for some people, especially some people that don't come out nowhere close to how they went in. And they only went in for a couple years.
Right.
So in Norway, right. So Norway's saying we want to normalize you. We want to give you the same clothing that you would have in society, the same radio, the same, knives. They trust them, with knives to cut up their food and all this stuff. And they don't have any issues because the normalization is when you treat people like animals, like we do in our prisons, that they act like animals.
Right.
So that's another piece of it that just really sticks out with Norway is the normalization process, they call it. And they say they want people to come out and be good neighbors. They say because that person, and it's real, could be staying next door to you.
Right.
You want somebody, because people do come out that way. Man, all I needed was just a little bit of treatment and you send me in there. Because I went in the store and I theft and it was over 5,000 and I just wanted to get high. And we give that person 5 years. And they don't come back and they're that same person.
Right.
And so that's what restorative justice is, evaluating situations. It has nothing to do with the politics. It has to do with how do we meet the needs of these three stakeholders? How do we make sure the victim is the loudest voice taken care of? How do we find out what went on with this offender so he don't offend again?
Right.
And I guarantee we'll have safer neighborhoods, safer communities.
Yeah, I think that is a huge part of the process. And when you're talking about that normality principle is what they're calling it in Norway, is to reduce the feeling that of living in a correctional facility as much as possible, so it's as much
Right.
as it is outside. Let me say that some people have looked at the process of restorative justice as, like you said, potentially soft on crime. But there's one particular judge in Dallas, Texas, who has a re-entry court. His name is Judge Bobby Francis, and he has sentenced several death penalties in Texas. And after years of being on the bench, he starts to notice that he's signing people up to head back to prison a second, third, fourth time. So he's at a certain point aware that whatever the system is not working. And this is someone who's very hard on crime. I mean, he said 6, 7 or more death penalties that he's approved. And now he's one taking a stance and saying there's got to be a different way for this process to work. That reentry court, I think, is in several states now. And Salinas Valley Prison in California has brought in a bunch of the restorative justice processes from Norway as well. What do you think it will take for us to institute something like this on more of a national level? Is it possible even?
People to, allow themselves to get beyond that fear. What I mean by that is, and a lot of it's just created. Um, fear that if we let these guys this, that, and the other, they're gonna this, that, and the other. And that goes back to what we talked about earlier. We have a system that's barbaric. We have a system that we know is treating people subhuman at times in certain areas. Not all. And why wouldn't you be fearful?
Right.
As a society, if you're dogging people out when they come back out, it's the same fear with whites and blacks. There's been so much oppression that if I put this guy in power over me, he's going to do me like we've done them. Fear, fear. That person may not even be thinking like that. That person, matter of fact, might be thinking that, hey, if I get in that position, I'm going to do totally opposite than that. The best man gets the job. These are the things we have to conquer. It's all about relationships. But we have to be accountable again. And so in those situations there, fear keeps us from doing the things that Bobby Francis did. It takes courage. Simple as that, bro. Simple as that, bro.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that in most of my research and whatever it comes down to, I mean, you get into spirituality, you get into psychology, even into different forms of performance. It comes down to fear and love. Those are the, like, everything. It might even be the lack of love or the fear of fear, whatever it might be. But it coming down to those two items as the basis for motivation for almost all actions. And if we could be more empathetic, and it's not easy, I recognize what you're saying. And one of the things that I learned at a young age through basketball was the illusion of the difference in a person based on what the color of their skin was, what part of the city they're from, what building they go to on a particular day of the week. Now, I'm not saying that what they face outside in the world is is the same, because I've experienced that as well, and it's not. Um, I could never know what it's like to go through life as a black man. That's not my place in this life. But I can know that I have friends of all colors, all sexual preference, age, gender, or non-gender, designating, um, who are loving and empathetic. And there's levels of anything in all of us. It's It just depends on what a person taps into, what they tune into, and hopefully how they're able to manage their fear. And those are just my, some of my perspectives. But I was lucky enough through the game of basketball, because I worked my way into teams where I might have been the minority on the team as a white player, and was able to, even in tournaments, see that I made friends of so many different types from all over the world. And it didn't matter what the outside of them was showing me or telling me. It was about their heart and who they were as a person. And I was very grateful for that. Not everyone has had that experience. And I know what I look like. Of course, I know what I present to the public when I'm out in the public. And so that affords me certain experiences that are different than probably what you have, and vice versa. How do we, I mean, other than something like this right now, but as a collective, and even involving the feminine side of this, because this is too masculine having a conversation. How do we even start to have the conversation about healing what separates the racial tension or the racial divide? I mean, this is something that has been at the forefront of my mind and my heart for decades. I haven't experienced in my personal, in front of me, much racism. But I've met a lot of people who have talked about it. So I guess, I don't know, how do you feel we even begin to have this conversation on a larger level that can get to healing, that can get to more of our ability to see each other as another human being without a race involved. Like, it's not a race, it's communication, it's a relationship. How do we, I don't know, what are your thoughts? That's a broad topic, but I know it's
Well, boy, I tell you, man, it's a tough one, but I'm really encouraged um, with the upcoming generation. Okay, I've seen some phenomenal things, like through the George Floyd, through just man, you look out there, even in the world, these young kids and dealing with this mass shooting and stuff. These kids, because the issue is, bro, whether it's black, Jewish, or whites, when they're older, those are their times. Their times are different than ours.
right.
Way more hateful. The problem is when they try to project those times on today and into our mind and our stratosphere. But what's happening is with social media, and the unfortunate thing with the up and coming generation, they got all the fire, but they need somebody driving the car.
That's true. Yeah.
But they have that passion, bro, and they have that love for each other. They see that common vein.
Yeah.
All those things you start thinking about that was coming together in the 60s.
Right.
You know, regurgitating the hate, man. Just puking it. But what's happening today is, we'll go back to it again, fear. Bro, fear got this group think and politics and everything. Fear got people stepping out of and not having the values and principles and integrity that was instilled in them and their families. Fear got families separating
Right.
because somebody's saying that this is what's going to happen because of this, and it's spewing the hate. That's why restorative justice is so important right now. Every element that we need in this society is in restorative justice.
Right.
All right. But see, one of the things, like I said, the accountability piece, that's tough because that's getting certain people at the table to say, yes, it did happen. People have to understand that everybody, like when blacks mention reparations, it's like nasty. Like, what do you mean? We give you welfare or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if you think about what blacks have done, and I'm not getting on those soapbox, I'm just being real, and have got nothing but poverty and isolation in these communities. And then laughter when they kill each other because they're suffering and they got each other to look at. It's not hard mathematics.
Right.
So somebody have to be honest about that. There's a lot of generational wealth that never got passed down. And then you deal with the stigma of just having the color. And it's not about, because I don't believe in no 40 acres and mule, none of that. I just believe, in an equal playing ground. I always tell people, it's one of the things I kind of despise about the Democrats. I'm just being honest. They went in this a promising thing. Blacks didn't need promises. They needed assurances that if they were going to work and do things, stuff wasn't going to be stolen from them. They've built up communities just to get them burnt down. And nobody called them lazy. That's all blacks has ever done was work for nothing. Hell, they might be tired of working for nothing. That's why they don't want to work no more.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's a spirit in that. So the thing is, though, that's the conversation that's got to be had. But they got to be had in a way, Brother Echo, to where your black brother, your African brother is not indicting you. Because then I make you feel bad. I don't want to make you feel bad. I want you to empathize with me, and we draw strength in that, and we go further and say, hey, no more harm.
Right.
None of this white shit, black shit, this is my brother. That's how it happens. But we got to call it what it is. And some of that right now ain't happening is because, man, if you just look at this separation in our politics, you look at what's happening in our state houses. It's almost like, you know, we got some states out there that want to recede again.
Yeah.
Right? They said we don't federal government feds all y'all. We want to fund you, get you out of. But then blacks could say, well, when we were catching hell from them, nobody wanted to defund them then. Nobody thought they were the bad guys when they were going after Martin Luther King, COINTEL, all this stuff.
Right.
You see, these are things that people see, and we have to enlighten our white brothers on that this is why we feel that way, bro. And you might miss it, but I want to enlighten you so you can understand it. Like, it's not fair, you know, in these situations. So that's probably what the brother telling you, like, hey, man, you got to open your eyes. But it's hard coming from you because you're not going to feel what I feel. But guess what? When you do and empathize on that level, we pass conversation. Then we become allies of what's right.
Right.
And it's not just white and black. We go out there and say, you shouldn't treat people like this as a human being. And I know that's a big, lengthy goal, but we have to start bringing humanity back. And the only way we do it is starting to make people feel valuable. And guess how we make people feel valuable? By trusting. And trusting our instincts in humanity again. And not projecting, you know, because of our fear. That's why we can't move forward, because I have harmed you. And it ain't fun if the rabbit got the gun. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I get that there's so many aspects to that. There's so many things to get to forward solutions for any of these topics, but definitely comes down to communication and really empathy, like you said, and being able to feel more than just say. Because as I'm talking about this now, my main question is, how do we even talk about this? How do we even ask the questions that aren't offensive, so that they're not taken personally or taken the wrong way? For me, is all I can speak for is truly wanting to not just swim in the challenges.
And that's a fear, bro. That's another fear of offending your brother. Because I know a lot of, you know, my white brothers and sisters, that's what they struggle with. Like, Roscoe, man, I want to, you know, and that's where you learn. You sit back, you have to listen. You can't listen to respond. This is what I tell a lot of my white brothers and sisters all the time. When you're, and that's almost defensive, because that's a mechanism that come in from us abusing each other. You racist, this and that. So automatically, we're having a conversation. So Echo automatically, Roscoe, are you calling me a racist? No, Echo, we partners. I'm trying to educate you on what I feel.
Right.
And if you listen without being defensive, then and then you'll know how to communicate to me. You won't have no worries about offending me. And if I'm a real friend, I'm going to give you that liberty. You're going to even be able to joke with me, Echo. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You can't be that damn tight.
I mean, friends aren't that way.
Right?
Exactly.
But,
Yeah.
but we are. We are, because of the harm.
Right. Yeah.
The barriers that we have, you know, why am I going to even admit to how I feel about this black guy? All he's going to do is call me racist and all this other stuff. So it's the same way with law enforcement. I tell guys all the time, you think everybody signed up to be a cop just to go in minority areas and just be an asshole? No, that can happen though. If I sign up to protect and serve a community, and every time I go into that community, you're calling me pigs and you rotten son of a, you know what I mean?
Right.
Here it comes.
Yeah.
That's what happens in our relationship. So one of the things, like I said, we have to find a way to communicate also. one of the things that I do, and I have wonderful conversations like I'm having with you, they're easy. I make them easy because I'm not indicting you, bro. We talking about how do we love each other? How do we get other people to love each other? How do we bring peace? You understand that. So as long as we don't come in that room with other stuff other than that, and that's what we do with this gun stuff. I don't care if you Republican, Democrat, Independent. When we come in that room, man, and we genuinely talking about these kids, we genuinely talking about things that matter. Let's go back to that blood again, that common vein. Bruh, we can have our prejudice. See, that's another thing. Everybody feel like because somebody may be prejudiced, they're racist. No, that's not accurate. I can be prejudiced against a black guy. I don't like his hair. I mean, real talk. Prejudice is not racism, bro. It's not racism. We are prejudiced. And guess what that entails? Most time a lack of understanding.
Right.
We're going back to that again. So you're prejudging something because you don't know much about it. Another protective mechanism.
Ignorance.
Out of fear. Fear, it's fear. Because we all have an opportunity to learn more. But we make excuses not to. I don't know if I want to learn this. What's going to come out of that? Maybe some people understand that Echo and Roscoe spent some time here trying to connect with the world and show them that it's not hard to love. It's not hard to have a conversation, bro. We just have to be real about it, be intentional, and come into it, knowing that I have to listen to you. I had to listen to understand, dang, my white brother terrified to talk to me. This is why we ain't having a conversation, man, and so not you, I had to learn that through a lot of my relationships. I hear it all. I walk on a landmine, Roscoe. Why? Because maybe they made that mistake and said some things, and guess what? Got fucking persecuted, excuse my language.
Right, yeah.
You white something. Never again. Shut down conversation. So it's all about the relationships, building the trust, knowing that we have a common humanity that we need to look out for. If I'm not hurting when you hurting, this is what I worry about today. We're wondering if people could just see people just bleed out somewhere and or choke out and like just a deer or animal on the highway. Because we're losing a lot of empathy for each other, bro. And I like to believe in that arc, bending, and all that good stuff. But I think we got to do the work.
Right.
And so the work for me, is restorative justice. But the personal work is waking up every day, without, like I said before, getting into my rap sheet. We can have another discussion on that.
Yeah.
Because I'm living restorative justice. If I can get here and see some of the relationships that I've built, the relationships that I constantly work to build and repair, it's doable. It's hard work, though. Man, it's hard work. When you harm and hurt relationships, it's hard because you're really on their time, and that's that victim piece. The victim we shouldn't be rushing nothing. I tell people that you shouldn't even ask a victim for, would you forgive me? If you've taken something, you shouldn't ask for nothing. Now, if they choose to forgive you, then cool. But you got to do the work regardless. And there's going to be situations where some people are not going to forgive you. They may never forgive you. What do you do with that, Echo? You forgive yourself.
Right.
You do the work to become a better human being, forgive yourself, and come back to the community righteous. Even in situations where you don't go anywhere. All right? There is a redeeming process within yourself. But if you allow that process to be determined by other people, I'll determine when Echo is redeemed. No, you redeem yourself by being accountable. That's the first step. Understanding the harm that you've committed. Okay? As part of that accountability. What you're willing to do to try to repair that harm to
Right.
others, right? And that could be to victims, that could be the community. I have to make guys understand that, yes, you hurt some victims with that gunfire, but you also left a community out there terrorized. They will always remember that moment. What do you owe to that moment? So for me, I go back into the community. I teach classes. I try to act like a decent human being. And there's people that still know me from when they thought I was a lost cause. So when they look at me and I'm talking about restorative justice, I live it. I am restorative.
Right.
So when I come in contact with other human beings, knowing the mistakes that I've made, Echo, who am I to judge?
Right.
And that's what we need to look at, because nobody's out there perfect, right? And that's the biggest thing right there. We a lot of people got to take that makeup off. And
That's great.
they're judging others in that. So we just got to have a restorative spirit. First starting, wake up in the morning, Echo, no harm.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
Rule number 1, no harm, because I done committed enough, no harm. And then I start looking at purpose. Okay, what can I do today that I can put in the bank I called of and me spiritual again, do this thing because it's almost like I gotta balance this thing out. I've done all this bad, so I want to make sure when I clock out, we got a balance here. So get in front of the big man, I can say, hey, I screwed up a lot, and you told me I would, but I really, really was working, and you know better than anybody. I was working hard to clean it up. So that's the purpose. That's the mission. At the end of the day, after I turn this off, I've done a lot of work today. I put the podcast in with Echo. I get to evaluate before I lay down, determining how successful the day is. It is not determined on anything monetary.
That's great. I really appreciate everything that you've shared. I got 2 more quick little things. The first one is, what questions are people like me and others not asking that the people might need to know?
Basically, on that level, we're talking about needs. That's one thing. Not just you alone, Echo. You can't supply them alone. We have to start looking around us and seeing what the needs of others are. Not wants, needs.
Right.
And we have to start answering those questions collectively. And once you start understanding needs, and that's another thing we tend to assume. I was just talking to somebody the other day, as a young lady, 14 years old with a child. I said, we assume that because she has a baby, she's a mother. She had a baby. She's a baby.
Yeah.
So let's ask, what is her needs, instead of assuming what her needs is. Because it's not just a check. It's not just a job and all that stuff. This young lady's a child. She needed emotional support.
Wow.
That she will not be able to give a baby. So those are the examples that I'm saying, that we ask the questions based on needs.
Right.
We look around and let that be our North Star. Let that be our driving point when we look around in our communities, and first and foremost, our families. What are the needs here? And just know that some of the people we love in some of our communities, we're not going to be able to meet them alone.
Right.
So that's when we come into collaboration. But once we start to establish a need base, all right, what are the needs here? What are the needs, not wants? All right, that's another thing I want everybody to understand, that restorative justice is needs based.
Right.
Needs, wants. So we cover all the needs. We want the victim to feel the need of safety. We want them to feel the need of being a survivor now, overcoming that. So we said, what kind of support do we get them there? For them to feel safe, for them to feel that they've been heard, and there's going to be some accountability. I'm talking about real stuff. We're talking about putting the real needs of the victims, and sometimes they may not need somebody to get 100 years. They might not need this 13-year-old to get 50 years. You know, they may be able to empathize on that level due to some of the things they did at 13 years old. Ah, man, I can understand that. Why the prosecutor saying, no, I want to make an example out of this kid. That person can say, well, if you make an example out of that kid, then you may be victimizing me twice, because then now I'm going to be thinking about, you know, this kid spent the rest of his life. Was it that's, you know, so that's why restorative justice is victim-centered. The victim should be the voice in the room. We support that voice, but we don't leave the offender hanging.
Right.
We go back over there. You're going to be accountable for this. You know what you did, right? All right. Once again, how you going to be accountable? How you going to make yourself better so you don't do this again? How you going to honor that victim? And see, like I said, that could just be a victim may not want to talk to you. So honoring the victim can be just getting yourself together and never, you know, victimizing someone else again.
Right.
And then out into the community and being, and that don't mean you have to be an advocate or do the things that I do, but just be a decent human being. And that will be the reflection.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time. Tell me a little bit about the goal of ViableHealing and what's coming up for you with that organization.
ViableHealing. I'll just say this, you know, to you and your audience. I'm an alcoholic and I'm struggling tonight, and I don't want to drink. There's AA meetings. You got some 24 hours. That's going on. I got places of support. All the cities, same thing. Same thing about NA. All right. I'm struggling. Maybe want to do some drugs. All right. But what about if I want to shoot up some stuff? All right. What if I'm a kid that just getting bullied? Just want to commit suicide from social media tonight. What if I'm struggling in this relationship? Whatever it is, especially with men. What I want to create with ViableHealing is so simple, but so vital. Call it ViableHealing because I think it's, you know, when you talk mental health, people think like some foreign object. ViableHealing to me, it's just having places of support. Not places to fix, therapy, nothing. Just to walk with people. Just to let them know that I understand. I'm going through it too. I lost my family to fentanyl. I lost my family to gun violence. And you create these healing circles. Even for men, we call them containers. I gotta call them containers with men because we bring so much toxic stuff in. And that's the toxic masculinity. You put some men in a container, and once they start to trust it, you're going to need just as many boxes of tissues as you would need for women.
Right.
Because where do we take our armor off at? Not at work, not with the wife, not with the kids. It's what I tell guys, like some guys say, I don't like a woman with makeup because, you know, it's got to be uncomfortable for her. I tell guys to take their makeup off. That's our
right.
Acting like we're okay all the time.
Yeah.
Echo, that's how we crash. So ViableHealing is creating circles, almost as if they're in AA meetings around town. I want to have circles for kids of parents of fentanyl. It's a lot of that in the urban community right now that need support. Definitely a lot of families with gun violence. We need support for suicide families that, you know, and it's basically grief healing for facilitation. So I'm doing that. I incorporated that with what I do at Victim Impact, Emotional Fluency. I wanted that in there too because I truly believe that families don't know how to heal. And I've seen that. Instead of becoming closer, they kind of, you know, because they don't know how to heal. And those are a lot of emotions we talk about, the 6 core, the feelings around it that people don't know how to process. So, Yes, viable healing. Mental health, and I mean that's just for me viable. Why can't I have that? Why can't I establish that? Places that people know on a Wednesday night they're going to be in here, and tonight it's going to be a group, and then over here I got another group that's going to suit me because that one didn't. And this one's wide open. This is just open grief, right? But some of them will be specific. And let me just give you this ending. This is the beauty of what I see. I want to have a community grief group come in for the gun violence, and I want them to bring a piece of clothing of the losses. And each group keep bringing clothing in, and we sew those clothing into a big quilt.
Wow.
And then we demonstrate that quilt to show how connected we are in our healing, our grief, and our suffering. And we're together. And that's what we're talking about here. It has nothing to do with color. I like to always go to that vein, man. If I cut you, bro, you go bleed just like me.
Yeah.
So that's what I look at more than anything. And I think that's what we can really get to once we really see the value in each other, get past all that exterior stuff.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for all of your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience, everything that you shared, your time, of course. I look forward to seeing the progress with Viable Healing.
Well, I appreciate you. Appreciate your time, brother. Appreciate your viewers, all right?
Have a beautiful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Peace.